Today I'm going to go over problem 10-4 with you. I have a picture of the instructions from the textbook because we will need this worksheet to help us find our numbers that we need. I also have a picture of the closing entry process, so hopefully you watched the video that I posted previously that goes through temporary versus permanent accounts and then the actual closing process. I'm going to show you the process using RT accounts, and then I'm also going to help you record our closing entries. So the very first step is on the center account title, we are going to write closing entries, and that needs to be centered here. Now, closing entries always happen at the end of the accounting period. It's going to be December 31st, and we're going to have 4 separate entries. So according to our process here, our first step is to move our revenue balances into income summary. So let's go ahead and look at our accounts here. So it looks like we only have one revenue account for $14,965. So what we're going to do, we have that $14,965 balance in our revenue account. We're going to debit revenue for that same amount. And since we are debiting revenue, we have to credit income summary because we always have to have a debit and a credit. So that's our first entry. So let's go ahead and put that in our general journal. So again, we're going to debit equipment rental revenue for the $14,965, and we're going to credit income summary for the same amount. Always have to have a debit and credit, and they always have to equal. Now, what's special about our closing entries is we don't need a source document because we indicated that these are closing entries here at the top. So that's our first closing entry. So let's go ahead and go back to our process. So we have number 1 down. We put our revenue into our income summary. Next, we need to move our expense balances into our income summary. So if we go back to our paper here, we've got 4 expense accounts for 4 different amounts. So I'm just going to include those here in our expenses here. We've got a debit for $1,500, $1,560, $1,000, and $1,230. We are going to credit all of those separately, so for the same amount, and they have to be separate because we have to post them to each separate account. But when we do income summary, we're going to do our compound entry, and we're just going to add all of these together. So I'm going to pull up my little calculator here. I'm going to add 1,500 plus 1,560 plus 1,000 plus 1,230, and we're going to debit income summary for the 5,290. Okay, now remember, when we're in our general journal, we have to put our debit first. We need to put our date because they are separate entries. So we're going to do income summary for the 5,290 that we calculated. And then we have to list each of our expense accounts separately. So we've got advertising expense for the 1,500. We've got maintenance expense for the 1,560. Oops. And then we've got rent expense for the 1,000, and utilities expense for 1,230. So we've got all of our expense accounts listed separately. We're going to do one post to income summary compound entry right here. Okay. So back to our process, we're then going to move our income summary into our capital account. And this balance is going to be the same as net income or net loss. So we're going to move this into our capital account. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate our balance in our income summary. So again, I'm going to grab my calculator here. We're going to take our highest amount minus our lowest amount, because remember, income summary does not have a normal balance. So 14,965 minus 5,290, and I get 9,675. Does that match what we have in our worksheet? It does, so we are good to go there. So once we calculate this, we're going to have a credit balance of 9,675. So this is the amount that we need to move to our capital. So we're going to debit it for the 9,675, which means at the end we would have a zero balance. And since we're debiting income summary, we're going to credit capital. Now, another easy way to remember what to do with capital is we know that this is a net income because our revenue is higher than our expenses. Net income is good for our business, which means we're going to increase capital. So let's go ahead and journalize that. We're going to debit income summary for the amount of net income. A lot of people will do it for the amount of the capital, and we're not closing our capital account, we're closing income summary. So our owner is Ronald Hicks Capital for the same amount. Remember, debits and credits have to equal. Cool. Alrighty, so that is step number 3. We moved our income summary to our capital account. Step number 4 is to move our withdrawals balance into our capital account. So let's go ahead and look at our withdrawals account. We've got $2,350 in our withdrawals. So let's go ahead and show that here. 2,350 balance. We're going to credit that for 2,350. If we're crediting withdrawals, we have to debit capital for 2,350. So let's go ahead and record that. 31. We are debiting Ronald Hicks Capital for the amount of our withdrawals and crediting Ronald Hicks withdrawals for the same amount. Okay, and then we're done. So let's go ahead and look at what we did here. So our revenue account now has a zero balance. Our expense account has a zero balance. Our income summary has a zero balance. Withdrawals has a zero balance. Our capital, I forgot to put in here our beginning capital, which would have been the $19,775. This will not have a zero balance. This is a permanent account, but we can go ahead and calculate the new balance in that account. We're going to take our $19,775 plus our $9,675 minus our withdrawals, and we now have $27,100 in our capital account. And again, this should match what we have in our statement of changes in owner's equity. Now, we are done with problem 10-4, but one thing I want to include in here is that once you go post these to the ledger, you have to put closing entry in your description in your ledger, because we don't have a source document for all of these. We just know that we're closing these out. So in our ledger, you have to fill out the description column and put closing entry. But we're done with problem 10-4.